They tried to keep blacks secluded in one section of town. And guess what? Blacks were not having it, and we're going to find out why. The setting is Chicago between the 1920s and the 1940s. We're continuing from the book titled Black Metropolis, a study of Negro life in a northern city by sociologists St. Clair Drake and Horace Caton. Excellence. Midwest Metropolis seems to say,
Negroes have a right to live in the city, to compete for certain types of jobs, to vote, to use public accommodations, but they should have a community of their own.
This was when blacks were entering Chicago at rapid rates, and the area called the Black Belt was overcrowding. As a result, some blacks attempted to live in predominantly white neighborhoods, where they generally were not wanted. So this person from the white community is saying that blacks should have all the legal rights, but stay in your own community. Stop trying to shake and bake your way into our neighborhoods.
Perhaps they should not be segregated by law, but the city should make sure that most of them remain within a black belt.
Why did the city need to do it? Why not the private members of his community? As we have suggested previously, Negroes do not accept this definition of their place. And while it is probably true that, if allowed free choice, the great majority would live as a compact unit for many years to come, they believe that enforced segregation is unjust. Now, some blacks didn't want segregation simply because they wanted to live around whites. But others were against it simply on principle. They didn't like being told where they could and could not live, especially knowing that whites weren't restricted in the same way. Now, whites most certainly didn't want to live in black neighborhoods, but they could if they wanted. While the choices of blacks were severely limited, they didn't have the other options. Thus, one prominent old settler, the daughter of a German father and a Negro mother, was vitriolic in her denunciation of residential segregation.
I don't think we would need any housing projects on the South Side if Chicago wasn't so full of this silly old race prejudice. We ought to be able to live anywhere in the city we want to. What the government should do, or somebody with money, is to fight these restrictive covenants and let our people move where they want to. It's a dirty shame that all types of foreigners can move anywhere in the city they want to, and a colored man who has been a soldier and a citizen for his country can live only in a black belt. What's the use of fighting for a country that treats you that way?
That's a good point. But what this was just another continuation of what the country was founded upon. Those who could fit within the category of white at the top, while those in the black category at the bottom. Many of the European immigrants could eventually become accepted into the white identity, and through that they inherited those perceived white privileges. A colored ringer man in a laundry came to Chicago in 1921 because he had heard of the good wages and grand opportunities. Now, having become well-adjusted, he resents residential segregation.
Residential segregation is a big mistake. When I came here, there were white and colored living in the same neighborhood, and the people seemed to understand each other. But since this neighborhood is colored only, everything is different.
Here's how.
There are less jobs, and the neighborhood is not kept as clean as it used to be.
He didn't specify, but this could be because the colored who moved in didn't keep the place as clean, or it could be that the city services neglected the area, or maybe even a combination of both.
I cannot offer any way to break down segregation. When I was married, I tried to rent houses out of the district, and the real estate agents wouldn't rent to me. Yes, if Negroes can get houses in Hyde Park or anywhere else, they ought to take them. For the housing condition for colored on the South Side is rotten.
Another laborer from Georgia who has been in the city nearly 30 years was also heated in his denunciation.
Racial segregation is rotten. When white and colored both lived in this section, the rents were not so high and there seemed to be a better understanding. I have often wondered if segregation has not had a lot to do with the lack of employment, for there are certain white people that try to prove that all Negroes are bad. When they come over here, they go to the worst part of the section to prove their point.
Somewhat more moderate in his disapproval is a colored chauffeur who came to Chicago in 1912 as a Pullman porter.
Racial segregation is something that I am not sure is a blessing. The housing proposition is serious, for the rents are very high, and the houses are not kept up as they are in white neighborhoods. On the other hand, if we were scattered among the white people, there would be far less work, for by being close together, we get a lot of work from the stores owned by white people that are doing business in our neighborhood. I've thought of ways to break down this segregation, but when I think that anything you do makes you a lawbreaker, you then cease to fight individuals, for then it becomes a war with the law.
That's that extra layer of protection that whites had built into the system. This man knew what he was up against.
Remember that the police, the judges, and the strongest lawyer groups are all white and they stick together.
Until it's a whole lot of money involved. Then they get the backstabbing and throwing each other under the bus.
I've seen one case of a fight between the police and the colored citizens and know that it was far from being an equal fight.
That's for sure. Many other Negroes, however, express a willingness to risk trouble in attacking this form of segregation. A skilled worker, a respectable church member, was very emphatic on this point.
Hyde Park is no more than any other place in Chicago. The Negroes ought to move into Hyde Park or any other park they want to move into. I don't know of anything on earth that would keep me out of Hyde Park if I really wanted to move into it. Personally, I don't care anything about the goodwill of white people if it means keeping me and my people down or in restricted neighborhoods.
It was the principle behind it for him, which I completely understand. Most humans don't like being forced into doing things, especially if they don't support the reason behind it. It may have made sense to whites, but for many blacks, there was no justifiable reason why they should be restricted to living in a certain area. A minority defends the existence of enforced residential segregation. This is done not on principle, but as a matter of expediency or for fear of racial clashes, or because such persons feel that the time to attack segregation has not yet come. Thus, a colored waiter who blames most of the discrimination against Negroes on the Great Migration partly defends segregation.
I myself believe segregation is good, for if the white and colored lived together, there would be fights constantly. About the only business benefit we derive from a Black Belt region is from a political standpoint, for there are a lot of people working that have gotten their appointments from their power as a voting factor. I think segregation is caused by the Negroes' failure to try to get out of the district. In fact, I have never tried to live out of the district. There is no reason. I just have not thought of it.
Occasionally, the opinion is expressed that Negroes are not ready to move into better neighborhoods, that they must first prove their worth by making the Black Belt a cleaner, more orderly, better kept area. Uh-oh. Thus, one man states,
"Our duty to ourselves and to those with whom we come in contact is to show the world that we are an advanced people, that we are law-abiding and respectable, and that we are able to care for the property we control or occupy. You can bet your bottom dollar that when we do this, we will be welcome wherever we care to live."
He's got a point. But here's what I'll add. Instead of trying to show the world, how about just trying to show yourself and show your own community? Start with that. Then look at world recognition as a side effect. This theory that individual Negroes must wait until the whole group improves itself before they can get out of the Black Belt is not at all popular with ambitious Negroes. Ambitious Negroes were the ones seeking upward mobility. They were the teachers, business owners, skilled professionals, and so forth. These people, according to the authors, didn't want to hear about all this talk about improving the community as a whole before moving out. They didn't want to hear that. They probably figured that it would take way too long, and they didn't have time for that. They wanted to move out as soon as they could. Most Chicago Negroes feel that the right to rent or buy a house offered to the public should be inalienable. I agree. If it's offered to the public, then Negroes being members of the public shouldn't have their rights to rent or buy removed. These were lessons that blacks had to help whites learn. They really had to help them in this area. Lessons on fairness, basic justice, and what the public really means. If they didn't want to rent or sell to Negroes, then they should have had some type of private underground system that included only white buyers. And Negroes would have never known when homes in those areas were for rent or for sale. But whites, for many reasons, weren't willing to organize on that level. Yet Negro businessmen and politicians will sometimes state privately that they prefer keeping the Negro population concentrated. Here it comes. During a campaign against restrictive covenants, one prominent Negro leader confided to an interviewer,
Sure, I'm against covenants. They are criminal. But I don't want Negroes moving about all over town. I just want to add little pieces to the black belt. I'd never get reelected if Negroes were all scattered about. The white people wouldn't vote for me.
You gotta watch the Me, Myself, and I centered Negroes, because they were just as untrustworthy as many of the whites, especially the politicians. His main focus was about himself being reelected, not what was best for Negroes. So there's no telling what type of backroom deals he was willing to make with whites. You see? I'm telling you, it gets wild out here. Negro newspapers and civic leaders unanimously oppose enforced residential segregation and bitterly attack the forces that have created an overcrowded black belt. What were the forces that created an overcrowded black belt? Economic, legal, and social forces. The economic forces dealing with blacks being kept in these lower wage positions, which resulted in the inability to afford to live anywhere else. Then you have the legal force, which is dealing with the restrictive covenants that explicitly stated no Negroes allowed. And then there's the social force, which deals with whites viewing blacks as undesirable members of society and doing everything possible to keep them confined to their assigned community. To them, the area is a black ghetto, and they insist that
new areas should be opened to break the iron ring, which now restricts most Negro families to intolerable, unsanitary conditions. Restrictive covenant agreements and the iron ring creating a Negro ghetto must be smashed.
Even the chairman of the mayor's committee accepted the characterization of the Black Belt as a ghetto, and there was general agreement among the participants in the mayor's conference in 1944 that most of the social problems within the Black Belt were fundamentally related to the operation of restrictive covenants. Only the spokesman for the Chicago Real Estate Board disagreed. The conference listed among the ghetto conditions high sickness and death rates, a heavy relief load during the Depression, inadequate recreational facilities, lack of building repairs, neglect of garbage disposal and street cleaning, overcrowded schools. The responsibility of these issues could, to a large degree, be attributed to restrictive covenants, high rates of crime and juvenile delinquency, and rough treatment by the police. But these here are not as simple. Keeping people restricted to an overcrowded area will create high crime if people are already culturally primed for the crime. Because all poor ethnic groups do not respond with violence and crime, even in poor overcrowded areas. For example, the Hasidic Jews in Borough Park, Brooklyn. They are statistically one of the poorest groups in the city, but they also live in a neighborhood with one of the lowest crime rates in the city. You see? So overcrowding, crime, and poverty don't have to exist together. But with the blacks, it did, due to their history and what they had gone through. Okay? So with that being said, we're going to pick up with some more fire in the next commentary. Right now, I thank you for your time and attention. My name is Brooklyn St. Michael, and I'll see you in the free world.